earth you my desire, though my flesh fail. You're the strength of my heart. And as for me, ooh, drawing near to you, oh Lord, is good for me. I've made you my refuge. You're the strength of my heart. When I was beaten, deeply pierced with thee, how pleasing this creature in your sight. Nevertheless, I'm constantly with you. You took me and held my right hand, and guided me with your counsel. You're the strength of my heart. When I was beaten, deeply pierced with thee, how pleasing this creature in your sight. Nevertheless, I'm constantly with you. You took me and held my right hand, and guided me with your counsel. Whom have I in heaven but you? There is none on earth you my desire, though my flesh fail me. You're the strength of my heart. You're the strength of my heart.
Attention this morning to the words which are to be found in the 73rd Psalm and the 24th verse. The 24th verse of the 73rd Psalm. Thou shalt guide me with thy counsel, and afterward receive me to glory. Nevertheless, I am continually with thee. Thou hast holden me by my right hand. And yet, as we saw last Sunday morning, the thing he can't get over is this, that in spite of all that which is so terribly true of him, he nevertheless is still in the presence of God. Indeed, he is continually there. And he begins to realize that he's been there all along and the whole time. So now he begins to have an insight into the very way in which he recovered and the very way in which he was prevented from doing this terrible thing. And he sees that it's all the grace of God. It was God's grace that had covered him from beginning to end. And you remember, we began considering this biblical teaching with respect to the grace of God last Sunday morning. The general proposition is that salvation is entirely of grace. We are saved by grace through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God. It's entirely grace. The glory is entirely God's for the salvation of every soul in every respect. And then we began to analyze the biblical teaching with respect to grace. And it can be doesn't stop at that, you see. We went on to consider, you remember, restraining grace. It was God who'd held this man back. He'd almost gone. Why didn't he go? Well, he thought it was the recollection of the harm it would do to the weaker brethren. But the great question is, what put that into his mind? And the answer is, God put it into his mind. God restrains us. It's a tremendous thought, this. It's a tremendous doctrine. God allows his children to wander very far sometimes, as I said last Sunday morning. So far at times that some people say that man's never been a child of God at all. But that is to misunderstand the doctrine of backsliding. God seems to let us go all the way, but he never does let us go all the way. He holds us by our right hand and pulls us back at the critical moment. It was God who held him, restraining grace. And then, you remember, we considered restoring grace. God brought him back and gave him, it was God who took him to the sanctuary. It wasn't a mere idle thought that entered his mind and made him say, well, what if I go to the house of God? Not at all. It never works like that. And anybody in this congregation who's ever wandered away from God or who's been a backslider, if you examine your own experience, you will find this, that what you may have thought had come to you as a sudden impulse, on deeper investigation, was no sudden impulse at all. It was God who put it into your mind. He does. He manipulates in our very minds and thoughts. He'd taken the man to the sanctuary, and as a result of that, he had restored him. Well, now, that is the point at which we had arrived at the end of last Sunday morning. But now, all that, of course, belongs to the past. He's still, as it were, looking back. He can't get over this. There's nevertheless this astounding thing. I'm still in the presence of God. God still looks on me and is still concerned about me. God's still interested in me, in spite of what I've just been doing, and in spite of what I almost did. Nevertheless, I am continually with thee. He can't get over it, and he sees, well, I'm here because of God and God's grace. And then realizing that, he turns to the future. What's the future going to be like? And his answer is, the future is going to be the same. I am continually with me because, in a sense, thou hast held me by my right hand, and thou shalt guide me by thy counsel, and afterward receive me to glory. Now, the first point which we must make in considering this is this, that this further step that the psalmist takes is one which is really quite inevitable in view of what he's already said. Now, my whole case this morning depends upon that proposition. My argument is that a man who has realized what the psalmist has realized about the past must of necessity and by an inevitable logic go on to say this about the future. So that if we cannot say what this man says about the future, it means that there is a defect in our understanding of the past. In other words, the Christian life is a whole. The doctrine of grace is one and indivisible, and you can't take out parts of it and leave others. It's either all or none. It's everything or nothing. So that I say that the man goes on to make this statement because, in a sense, he is bound to say so. He argues, I take it like this. I have been restrained, he says. I was held when I'd almost gone, by the mighty hand of God as the result of his grace. I am restored, I am in the presence of God, and now again enjoying the presence of God. Why? Well, because of God's restoring grace. But then the question arises, why has God dealt with me like this? Why did God restrain me? Why has God restored me? And there's only one answer to that question. God has done this because I belong to him, because he is my Father, because I am his child. In other words, this isn't something accidental or fortuitous. God has done all this to me, says this man, because of the relationship that exists between us. And therefore, if that is true, well then he must go on doing that in the future. You know those mighty statements which we read together from the 8th chapter of Romans, that inevitable sequence. Them he hath called, them hath he also justified, justified, he hath also glorified. The Apostle Paul teaches there quite plainly that if God has justified a man, he has also already glorified that man. The whole of that portion is but a tremendous exposition of this final doctrine, ending with the ultimate challenge: who shall separate us? With the answer, nothing. I am persuaded. And what a weak word is that word translated. Persuaded. It means I am certain. It's even stronger. I am absolutely certain that neither death, nor life, nor angels, etc., nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. And another one. He, says Paul to the Philippians, which hath begun a good work in you, will perform it until the day